this video, we'll be reviewing another online high-stakes cash game, this time between Iceman2710 and Stefan11222. Again, credit for this video goes to online high-stakes poker. Iceman opens in the hijack with 4 of spades, 4 of hearts. So although this is a 6 max game, for the assumed ranges we'll be using Range Converter's 9 max 150 big blind solutions, since the effective stack is around 190 big blinds here, and Range Converter's 100 big blind 6 max sim does not have a flatting range for the small blind. Using this range, we see that pocket 4s are opening with some frequency, but it is mostly folding. However, this solution assumes a 3x raise, so you'd expect that the GTO strategy for a 2x raise should allow for a greater percentage of opening combos. The action folds around to Stefan in the small blind, and he 3-bets on the larger size 5.5x with 7 of hearts, 7 of clubs. According to these solved ranges, this is a low frequency 3-bet. However, Iceman's smaller opening size may warrant an increase in 3-betting frequency by the small blind. The action folds back around to Iceman, who calls, and we see that with these deeper stacks, the solver is calling with virtually all of its pocket pairs, including pocket 4s. The flop comes 5, 4, 8 rainbow, and Stefan checks, and we see that the solver is in fact checking most of its range here, including with pocket 7s. In a prior video, we discussed how in a 3-bet pot, the solver will often c-bet with higher frequency and with a larger sizing out of position on low dry boards. However, we see that there is a significant distinction between the c-betting strategy on a low disconnected board versus a low connected board. The potential made straights, sets, and 2 pairs on this connected flop that the pre-flop caller should have a greater proportion of negates to some degree the advantage the pre-flop aggressor will have in stronger overpairs. Coupling this with the fact that Stefan is out of position makes mostly checking on a board like this the preferred strategy. With bottom set, Iceman bets a smallish amount, around 39% of pot, and we see that the solver is betting this sizing with most of its range, which is expected given that this board generally favors the preflop 3-bet caller, who should have a number of lower pocket pairs and suited connectors in its range. As a result, we see that the solver is betting even with combos that in a vacuum you typically would expect to check, such as these stronger ace highs and weaker pairs with some showdown value, which really highlights how important understanding the intersection between ranges and board texture is from a GTO perspective. Stefan calls, which we see as the standard play with pocket 7s. Stefan could also raise here, given that, as we just discussed, Iceman should have been doing a lot of betting on this board, even with a number of his Broadway combo whiffs, and pocket 7s could use protection against high card runouts. Also, Stefan does have additional equity with his gut shot, giving him somewhat of a safety net in case he's behind an overpair or better. The turn brings the queen of hearts, Stefan checks, and Iceman continues, this time ramping up the sizing with a 78% pot bet. And we see that the solver actually prefers an even larger full pot sizing here as it begins to polarize its range. Although the queen in isolation is more favorable to the pre-flop raiser's range, as the pre-flop caller, Iceman still holds the advantage in the more nuttish holdings, as we see that he has a greater percentage of straights, sets, and 2 pairs given this board. As such, the solver is utilizing this larger sizing with these stronger holdings, as well as some middle, top, and overpairs. And to balance its range, the solver also bluffs using this same sizing with some gut shots, flush draws, and certain of these ace-king combos, either that have blocking properties to Stefan's queen X hands, and or that contain a heart that can bluff jam river cards containing a heart. Interestingly, we see that the solver generally prefers not to bluff when holding a spade, possibly because it unblocks the ace-queen suited and king-queen suited combos without a spade in Stefan's range that should have called Iceman's flop bet with the backdoor flush draw. In Stefan's shoes, we see that the solver is continuing to mostly call with the pair and gut shot, even with the larger sizing. Although Iceman could have turned a top pair here, as noted, he should have a number of bluffs here as well, such as flush draws and gut shots, which justifies calling with Stefan's marginal hand, particularly with the backup draw. The river pairs the 5, Stefan checks, and Iceman bombs all in, repping a very polarized range with his overbet. And we do see that the solver agrees with this move, which raises the question of what conditions are present here that make utilizing a polarizing strategy profitable. Well, for one, Iceman has the betting inertia as he barreled on both the flop and turn. The solver seems to be less inclined to use a polarized river strategy when it plays more passively on prior streets, possibly because absent a unique board runout, a passive strategy is contradictory to the nuts or air range that a polarized strategy conveys. And conversely, when the hero has the betting inertia and the villain is playing passively, it often means the villain's range is largely capped. Secondly, you will often see the solver polarize with greater frequency when the hero has the proportional advantage in nuttish combos, since obviously these are the holdings that primarily want to grow the pot larger and can be leveraged to expand the hero's bluffing range. In this case, Iceman has the overall nut advantage in quads, full houses, straights, and trips. And finally, a polarizing strategy is often effective when there are ample opportunities for the villain to bluff catch, either because he has a number of medium strength hands given the board, and or there are a number of natural bluffs that missed on the river. In this case, Stefan should have a number of queens and other medium strength holdings in his range, some of which should be able to call larger bets. Additionally, there are a number of missed flush and straight draws in Iceman's range, which should increase Stefan's tendency to bluff catch. As such, we see that the solver is shoving all of its quads, full houses, straights, and trips, and some overpair and top pair combos as well. And for balance, the solver layers in a number of bluff shoves, including with 8-7, which blocks a straight, as well as a healthy percentage of these missed gut shots and Broadway combos, which do not contain a heart, since they unblock missed flush draws and block a number of Queen X combos in Stefan's range. That all being said, although the conditions are quite good for an overbet shove in this spot, I think there are certain players that may be reluctant to make this move for the fear of scaring off the opponent and losing value with such a strong hand. However, if you think this way, it likely means you are under bluffing. In my prior video, I reviewed a hand where Big Blind bets 3-bet jammed on a 10-5-3 rainbow flop with King Queen of Spades. I intentionally juxtaposed that hand with this one because together they embody both sides of the polarized coin, bluff and value. And although it must be quite painful to lose over 10k by bluffing all in with a marginal hand, doing so sets up the opportunity to win 19k when you shove with the near nuts, because having an arsenal of bluffs in your range forces your opponent to make some marginal calls to avoid being run over. One of the most often repeated criticisms of GTO is the claim that these types of polarizing strategies don't work at lower stakes where the players are less balanced. However, I think this assertion ignores basic math, right? If your opponents are overfolding, then a well-balanced strategy will make money off of bluffs. And if your opponents are underfolding, then a well-balanced strategy will make money off of value. In that way, the effectiveness of GTO is due in large part to the fact that it forces unbalanced players to essentially pick their poison, where no matter which way their imbalance is skewed, the GTO strategy will make money in the long run. Stefan calls facing this polarized bet, which should shift him into pure bluff-catching mode. As such, we see that the solver is calling with a number of its pocket 7 combos, since this is one of the better bluff-catching candidates in Stefan's range, as it blocks the straight. Interestingly, PO prefers calling pocket 7s that do not contain a club, likely because they block some of the 8-7 suited combos that the solver was shoving with in Iceman's shoes, holding middle pair and the straight blocker. However, this is getting a bit into the minutiae, and I think the general population would be less inclined to shove with 8-7. And we do see that the EVs for calling among all the pocket 7 combos are relatively close, so Stefan's play, I think, isn't really a major mistake. The solver is also calling with roughly half its pocket 6s, as they also block the straight. Additionally, it is calling with some of these stronger pairs, although it is clearly less inclined to call when holding an ace, even with aces and top, likely because the ace blocks many of the bluffs in Iceman's range, such as the nut flush draws, the wheel draws, and a number of combos that block Queen X. So the play in this video in many ways I think was rather standard. Iceman caught a set, barreled, and then shoved when he made a full house on the river, and Stefan called with a hand that was very marginal equity-wise, but was also one of his stronger bluff catchers. However, I thought this hand was interesting because it really illustrates the importance and power of polarization, which forces players to be prepared to risk their entire stack every single time they enter a pot. Additionally, if Iceman did not have a repertoire of bluffs that would have taken the same line as he took with his set, it would have been very difficult, if not impossible, for him to be paid off when he actually had the goods, winning a 38k pot against a measly pair of 7s. So that's the video for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay balanced.